Shalom to all my brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for coming to this presentation. You know, we hear all the time, as a Jewish people, we hear the term slavery in the Bible. People have great questions. They say, but isn't slavery all over the Bible, the Hebrew Bible? How do you explain this? You know, atheists ask some incredible questions. They say, you know, there's slavery all over the Bible. How do you explain this? Now, the word slave, eved, is spelt the same, S-L-A-V-E, but we're meaning two totally different things. In the ancient world and in the Torah, when you see the word slave, eved, in the Torah, eved is not slavery as in the slavery of the Atlantic slave trade, slavery of the South, 1800s, early 19th century. We are not talking about the same kind of slavery whatsoever. In fact, it's totally out of the question. In the Torah, an eved, a slave, S-L-A-V-E, servant, whatever you want to say, is a person who did not have a family member or a family. They were basically on their own. In the ancient world, we're talking over 3,000 years ago. In the ancient world, it's not like today. If somebody's on their own or they're homeless, or they have nowhere to go, they have no more family. They either become homeless, they try to get shelter, they can go to different centers to get help. In the ancient world, 3,000 years ago, we didn't have welfare. We didn't have societies to help the homeless. If you were on your own and you didn't have a family, or you were a widow, or someone who lost your family, or an orphan, you were as good as dead in the ancient world. That's the truth. When you do your studies in the ancient world, which I've done for years, in the ancient world at that time, if you were on your own, you were as good as dead. You could have been raped. You could have been killed off. You were considered a wanderer. Consider the chapter of Genesis in Bereshit, chapter 4, where Cain freaks out when Elohim tells him, you will be a wanderer. And what does Cain say? He says, I will die. If I'm going to be a wanderer, I'm going to be killed. This is too much for me. That's what the ancient world was like. If you were on your own, you did not have a family or a clan to protect you. You were as good as dead in the ancient world, unless you were a warrior of some kind. But even so, you were still a lone wolf. You have to remove your 21st century mindset when reading the Torah. You must take yourself back in time. Now, when you really think about it, if you think rationally, even if you are to think about, for example, the Old West, or any time period that wasn't as long as 3,000 years ago, even the 1800s, 1700s, 1600s, it's such a different world in the past. It was so different. Now, we're talking 3,000 years ago. So it's very critical that you have to get your 21st century mind out of that state of thinking. You have to go back to the ancient world. In the ancient world, in the Torah, the eved, the slave, was someone who attached themselves to an Israelite group or family to get the benefits of the family. They would come in and they would work for the family. In the ancient world, in the ancient world 3,000 years ago, you weren't just somebody who just, you know what, you're going to walk into someone's house and just ask to be adopted. It's not how it worked. In the ancient world, everybody had chores and things to do. It was a tough life. It's not cushy like today where we have microwaves, this, that, dishwashers. I mean, really think about this. So when somebody joined a family, you were expected to work. You were expected to work. And considering that, it looks as if in the ancient world, when you actually do your studies, that people would serve out to earn their way to stay in a home that didn't belong to them and in a family. And they would also get the benefits of the Israelite family. For example, being able to marry, being able to keep the Torah, keep the Sabbath. That's what we see all over the Torah, that all the strangers and even the eved, the slaves, can participate in these holy days and holy events. The eved, the slave, kept the Sabbath. Now, if they were a slave, why would they be resting on the Sabbath? If we're talking about slavery of the South, they were dehumanized. It was wrong. That is a sin. That is a horrible crime. The real slavery of the Atlantic slave trade and the slavery of the South, they actually treated African Americans as if they were subhuman. That is evil. That is a sin. In the ancient world, in the Hebrew camps, if you had one pillow, you know who got it? The Eved, the slave. If you had one mattress in the ancient world, you know who got it? The Eved. If you had one bed, the Eved got it. You slept on the floor. This is how the ancient world was. Even in Jewish culture later on, the same thing. Somebody joined the family, they get the benefits. If you have one room in the house, the Eved gets the room. Even in the Torah, there are examples of this. When Abraham is told by Elohim, God, that I will make a great nation out of you. He said, I'm too old for this. You must mean my Eved, my slave, Eliezer. He says, no, I'm not talking about your slave. I mean you. Why would Abraham say, you know what? No, you're going to make a great nation out of my slave. We're talking the same word, slave, S-L-A-V-E, but we mean two totally different things. Next, the Hebrew slave, Eved, was a person, a Hebrew, who stole or did wrong to another fellow Israelite. Stole something. They had to work off what they stole or the crime they committed against another Hebrew. So that's what we're dealing with here. We have to get this in order. We're saying the same word, slave, but we mean two totally different things. So remember, even with Thomas Jefferson, he owned hundreds of slaves. That's a sin. That's horrible. It's an abomination. That is not the same slavery that you see in the Bible, in the Torah. Now, what I explained before, in the Torah, there are many examples. For example, one last one I'll give you. In the Torah, it says there, for example, this is in chapter 21, it says, if the slave says, remember, Eved, slave, we mean the same word, two totally different meanings. If the Eved says, I don't want to leave, I want to stay here with my Israelite family, why would it say that? Why would a slave, like the slavery of the South, be saying, I don't want to go, I want to stay here? We are saying the same word, but mean two totally different things.